This is Nucleus Installation. Thank you for watching. I am Kevin England. In this lesson, we'll talk about getting ready to go pick up your bees and transporting them home, working with your provider upon pickup, preparatory steps in the yard to get things ready for the transfer, the actual transfer process, and then what to do post-install. Before we talk about the task of actually installing them, let's talk about some of the tasks that come before that, like picking up your bees and getting things ready. If you watch the package install video, then some of this is going to look kind of familiar, but there's a little bit of a different twist for a nucleus. Most of us these days pop the hatch on our SUV and slide the boxes into the back. In this case, you're going to want to put something down to protect your carpet from the colonies sitting there so they don't stain it. Anything like propolis or wax gets into the carpet, it's extremely hard to clean out, so make sure you have a sense for that. In the case of bringing a nucleus colony, you're usually going into a live apiary, and you're going to want to bring your full bee suit so that you don't get stung if that's a concern. Typically, when you're picking up packages, you arrive and there's a bunch of people coming and going. When you pick up a nucleus, it's on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes you're the only one with the provider, and other times you're standing in line. Whatever the case may be, work your way through the situation, talk to your provider, make your payment, and plan to load the nukes into your vehicle, securing them. And again, if you're carrying them in a pickup truck or something like that, ensure that they're protected from the wind. Like a package install, you want to make sure that the boxes do not overheat the bees during transport. If it's comfortable inside the vehicle or protected in the bed of a pickup truck, you should be good to go. But mind the interior temperatures and leave some space around the hives. Do not crowd them so that they get some air during transportation. It's on this slide that I'll say to you, you probably should go watch the package installation pickup video. Even if you're getting nukes, there's a lot of different tips in there about how to transport bees. Unlike packages which typically don't have loose bees flying around, most nucleus colonies, when you pick them up, are actually flying. You go and get them early in the morning before too many of the foragers get out. You close them off and you put them in your vehicle. That being the case, it's almost always universal that there will be stray bees flying around. And when you put the box into your vehicle, you will have loose bees flying through. One technique that you can do is employ some sort of garment bag around the box to capture any bees that are loose, say underneath the bottom board that you didn't catch, and therefore they won't be flying around inside your vehicle. Bring some blue painter's tape and look around, brush off any bees before you put them in, and see what you can do to try and prevent any bees from flying around in the vehicle during transport. Even if you've done a spectacular job at screening for the bees, it almost inevitably happens that on occasion a bee will get out, or bees, and they will be flying around inside the vehicle. Now, most of the time they'll stay down with the nucleus package or packages, and occasionally they'll come up and they'll be flying around the back windows. If you're not too squeamish about this, you could just keep an eye on them in the rearview mirror and make your way to your destination. Watching if they come forward, and if they get too close to you, you can open the center windows and they'll fly out before they get up into the driver's compartment. The other tactic is simply pull over in a safe place, open the doors, open the windows, let any errant bees out. They'll be fine. They'll go find a home, and you can then make your way through. If you've done a terrible job and there's lots of bees flying around, been there and done that, you can actually drive home in your suit since you brought one. It looks kind of silly, but don't be silly. If that's what you need to do, then do it. And then when you get home, open your vehicle, all the bees will fly out. And as you place your nukes, they'll find their way to them by smell. Been there and done that. It is pretty typical for those who start with package bees that they start in early April, and the conditions are usually cool and fine for transport of bees inside of a vehicle. In the case of nukes, sometimes they're not available till late April, May timeframe, sometimes even June in our region. And the temperatures can become very high during the time frame when you're transporting bees. One thing to keep in mind is in the compartment of a vehicle, you could turn the air conditioner on and open the windows. But if you put the bees in a trunk, they're in an enclosed space, and if you pull up to a stoplight or something like that with the sun beating down, it could be like leaving a pet in the car. You'll cook the bees and kill them all. Do be careful if you're transporting bees in the trunk of the vehicle on a hot day. You might want to consider putting them in the compartment with you, or at least stopping every once in a while, especially if you have a long drive, and airing out the trunk and giving them some fresh, cool air. Picking up a nucleus hive is a case-by-case experience. In this shot, you'll see that the provider has all of the nukes lined up, and you come in like a procession line and pick up the ones that you've ordered and load them into your vehicle. Some of them you come in and you do a one-on-one experience. They'll take you through the box and show you the bees and then close things up, and you're left to transport after making payment. I'm not sure which one you will experience. You should conjure up in your mind what's going to happen. Be prepared for either case. Bring your suit and think of the questions you want to ask your provider ahead of time so that you can be efficient in your connection with them as you're picking up your bees. It is rather typical for those who sell nukes to take care of the hives. They've been treated, they've been cared for, they should be full size, and they're anticipating that the colony would be 5 full frames of bees, a working queen loaded with resources at time of sale, and they've done everything that needs to be done in order to achieve that objective so that you'll be a happy consumer. Do, however, ask what treatments the provider did so that you can pick up the plan when you install them into your colony and understand what came before. One suggestion we have is that you make sure you have a means by which to record some information that's passed on to you from the provider. There are times when you converse with them that they tell things that you're going to want to remember. Bring a notepad, record a voice memo on your phone, do something, but do anticipate that you may want to take some notes while you're there. Now let's talk about an actual live inspection. If they're giving you a live inspection, most of the time they're going to show you a colony that they know is worthwhile for sale. It's very rare to find a colony that does not meet muster. As a new beekeeper, what meets muster? If you think about it, you want to see 5 well-formed honeycomb frames with lots of bees and resources. In a general sense, you'll know when you're looking whether that has it or not. Now you have to prepare in your mind ahead of time that if somebody opens up a box and you're looking at it and it just does not strike you well, it's a real clunker, to say no, I'm not going to make the purchase and walk away from the sale forcefully but politely. It's a very rare occasion. You generally do not get put into that situation, and quite frankly, most of the time you just stop by, you pick up your bees and you take them home and you find out what you have when you transfer them in. If you get a poor quality nuke, do go back to the provider and say to them you're not happy. Make sure that they know and see if you can work something out to get a better situation for yourself. It's caveat emptor, buyer beware, and you have to just kind of have in your head that sometimes bad situations happen. What do you plan to do about that? For the sake of being thorough, it needs to be said that sometimes it goes a different way. You bring your equipment, you go out with the provider, they light a smoker, and you're both in gear. They go through a full-size colony, selecting the frames for your nucleus, and they put it into your equipment. You seal it off, drive it home, place it on a hive stand, and you're good to go. Not a very conventional thing to do these days, but it does happen, and I would assume that you would know this is going to be the way it's going to go down. When you call and order your nuke from your provider, they should tell you how to do this, and this means that you'll prep your equipment for the ride and just operate in a little bit different of a way. While we're talking about preparatory steps before you head out the driveway to pick up your bees, make sure that when you get home, everything's set up and ready to go. We recommend you cut your grass before you get going, and also set up your hive stand and place a bottom board, only the bottom board, on the hive stand in anticipation of receiving the bees. You're going to want to put together a single box with an internal feeder and 9 frames with foundation to load in, and you'll hear the process for how to install the bees in just a moment. On the topic of preparation, if you're using wax foundation, one of the things we recommend is that you wait until the day before to install the wax foundation into your frames. Build your boxes, build your frames, but on the day before, that's the time to install your foundation. We like the fact that when the foundation is kept together in the package, it gives off a very strong, fresh wax odor. If you install them ahead of time, one, they get brittle in the cold and they're subject to breaking, and two, they dissipate some of that wax smell that is attractive to the bees and helps them to build out the frames. So do it the day before you're ready to do your installation. With the prep steps out of the way, let's talk about hive placement and transfer. For all intent and purposes, you can get home with your Nucleus box and install it right into your hive equipment. But we actually recommend that you take your Nuc box and place it on the bottom board that you set out in preparatory steps and allow the bees to get settled in. They've just been transported from point A to point B, and they may not be very happy at the moment, a little bit agitated. And the other thing is allowing them to reorient to the spot and go out and forage. Installing them the next day allows them to get settled and anchored to the location for where you're going to transfer them into new hive equipment. It's installation day, the day that you'll transfer your Nuc into your hive equipment. Start out your morning by bringing all your equipment out, setting it up in an organized fashion, donning your bee suit, and lighting your smoker. We'll have a link to accompany this lesson of how to properly light a smoker so it stays lit and give you the basics of that. In overviewing the process, what you're going to do is take the nucleus off of the hive stand, put it alongside where you're going to install your bees, and then transfer the bees out of that into your hive equipment. To get started, give a light puff of smoke at the entrance, pick the Nucleus box up, and set it alongside your hive stand. Set up your equipment, putting your entrance reducer underneath the box if you're using it, and you'll set your box, your inner feeder, fill your inner feeder, and put a couple frames in anticipation of the transfer. One thing to note is the colony is probably flying. If it's warm enough, bees will be coming and going, and when you move the box to the side, there will be bees coming right back to that spot, even though there's no hive there, and they're going to be confused, which means during the entire operation, you're going to have bees flying around. This is normal, nothing to be concerned about. Coming back to putting your equipment on the bottom board, we do recommend that you place an entrance reducer. Most of them have a small, a medium, and a wide open entrance. Use the medium entrance. Nucleus colony, especially if you just have 2 hives in the yard, can typically protect itself, but ideally you would put a nucleus on a entrance reducer in order to make sure that they're not going to get robbed out should something else find them. As we said, put your feeder in, fill it, add 3 frames. You want to put 1 right next to the feeder and 2 on the far side of the box, leaving obviously 5 frame space in the middle to install your nucleus colony. It's time to transfer the bees into your hive equipment. You'll note by the slide that we're going to offer you more than one option. We'll explain why in a moment, but this option is the simplest one and the recommended option. To move your bees in, first thing you'll do is take your smoker and smoke the front entrance of the nucleus colony. Boxes that you buy come in different formats. Sometimes they give you coroplast plastic boxes. Sometimes they give you a traditional 5-frame Nuc box with an inner cover and roof. Depending on what you have, smoke the front entrance and remove the cover, smoking as you go until you have the frames exposed. When you're looking at the top of the frames, if you see a lot of bees on there, issue a couple light puffs of smoke to drive the bees down inside the nucleus colony. Take your hive tool and extract frame number 1 or frame number 5 against the outside. Take your time and use care not to roll the bees against the wood so that you smash the bees and cause alarm. Sometimes packages are pretty tight, meaning the frames are glued together by the bees with propolis. If you find extracting the frame is a struggle, take your hive tool blade and stick it down between the shoulders of frame 1 and frame 2 on both ends, and that might help you to free the frame up a little for extraction. Pull frame number 1 and place it into the hive, being sure that you don't turn the frame around as you turn to go back to your hive equipment. What I mean by that is make sure that what was the front of your nucleus colony, the frame gets placed in the same orientation in your hive box. Finish off the installation by transferring all 5 frames, putting them in the same orientation again, and then ensure that your box has 9 frames and your feeder, tucking them close together so that they are not spaced apart when you're ready to put the roof on. Add your final frame and make sure that your feeder is topped off and you can cover off the hive and close everything up. Now let's talk about option number 2. Really the only difference is when you pull each of the frames out of the nucleus colony, you're going to inspect the frame for what's on it. If you have a typical nucleus colony, you'll have a couple frames that have bees being built, a couple frames that have some pollen storage, and some frames that might have excess honey or capped honey on the periphery. Ideally, in the perfect world, the bees would be placed in the center of your box. Honey and pollen would be stored to the outside when you transfer the frames in. Most accomplished beekeepers would set up the colony in that way. They would inspect all 5 frames and put the brood frames, or the place where the bees are being reared, in the center of the 10 frames and put the food frames to the outside. Being a new beekeeper, you probably do not have to fuss about this. However you put the bees in is going to be perfectly fine. But if you wanted to take that extra step of looking where bees are being built, you would look for eggs and larvae in the cells and put those frames in the middle and put the food frames to the outside. When you transfer the bees through the frames into the hive equipment, you'll note that the nucleus box is still going to have plenty of bees on the interior. You're going to want to transfer those bees into your colony. The way that you do that is pick the box up and turn it over upside down over the hive box that you just installed. There's 2 ways to dislodge the bees. One is you pull the box up and shake it down really fast, stopping abruptly, and the bees will fall off and rain down into the box below. Some will go in the air. Those will fly back to the hive eventually, and most of them land on top of the frames and they walk down into the hive. A secondary process is to take a fist, go on the hive equipment holding it securely, and wrap the hive really hard. Bang! That hit will drive all the bees off. They'll lose purchase on the interior of the equipment, and again, they'll rain down on top of the frames. Now, even if you shake hard or wrap the box, you'll still end up with a couple bees that hang on. Just turn the box over and set it out in front of the colony, and those bees will eventually, as the day goes on, go in and get into the hive. Now I'm going to reiterate a step where you want to take all the frames and push them together. You do not want gaps between the frames. The bees will fill those gaps with propolis and wax. Ideally, you'll take the 9 frames and the feeder, push them together and center them between the walls, and then you'll put your inner cover on, your outer cover on, and secure your hive with a strap, closing it up and being done with the installation. It stands to reason that post-install you will have some equipment left over. It kind of varies as to what beekeepers are doing these days when they sell their nucs, and it also factors into the cost. Most of them want to keep costs down for themselves and for you, so they're using temporary equipment, maybe Coroplast plastic temporary nuc boxes, or they've fabricated some cheap, if you can call wood cheap these days, boxes or enclosures to transport the bees in. On other occasions, they've given you a full nuc stack. If you have that, consider yourself lucky, as that's a great utility to keep into your kit. Whatever the case may be, there's always tons and tons of uses for these things, so keep them around. Store them in your bee space, wherever that may be, and yes, you're going to have a bee space in your future for your excess equipment and utility. The other thing that has to be said is that some providers will make arrangements that they want their equipment back, and there's an obligation for you in a specific time period to bring the box back to them. That keeps their costs down, and if you didn't want the equipment, well, you don't have to stash it or store it or discard it. Just keep these things in mind as you get done with your installation. In the first week, your best plan of action is watching from the outside. We do not recommend you go in and do hive inspections. The best thing to do is let the bees get acclimated to the new interior, start to build out wax, walk around on the woodenware, get their footprint pheromone and other scents into the hive, and they will truly make it their home. You don't want to disturb the process and possibly alienate the bees that they would abscond. It's extremely rare, so just stay out of the hive. In a week to 10 days, you'll do your first inspection, just checking to see that they're building wax and that the queen is laying, and there's really not much to that. We'll have additional instructions for you in the days to come. This covers how to install your bees from a nucleus colony, and as I just said, we'll talk to you about how to do the post-install care, how to do your first inspections, what to look for, and how to care for your bees until they build out that first box. We're going to show you things that you're going to see so you know what you're looking at and what to look for, and give you a little bit of comfort as you get your way through with actually having bees into your hive. Congratulations, this is an exciting time, and we're looking forward to carrying through to the next steps. If you have any questions, you can ask at our next online session. You can also send an email to the address on the slide. If you're watching from YouTube, you can leave a comment below. If you happen to be watching from our website, hover over the video and click on Go to YouTube to go directly to where the video is posted to leave a comment. One thing you could do while you're there is subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching. We'll see you at the next lesson.